online video lessons. My name is Sally, and today I'm going to talk about conditionals. Conditional sentences consist of two clauses, an if clause and a main clause. If the if clause comes first, a comma is usually used. If the if clause comes second, there is no need for a comma. For example, if I were president, comma, I would finish all was. Okay? But if I move it around, I would finish all was, no comma, if I were president. Okay? Right. Let's have a look at some different types of conditionals. The first conditional we're going to look at is called the zero conditional. And this is about facts or things that are always true. The form is if or when plus subject plus present simple with subject plus present simple. Very easy one to remember. Let's look at some examples. If you heat ice, it melts. This is a fact. If water reaches 100 degrees, it boils. Another fact. If you don't exercise, you become unfit. Another fact. When I'm worried, I don't sleep well. When I'm really tired, I can sleep anywhere. Make a note that if and when have the same meaning in the zero conditional because it's talking about facts. Okay. What about the first conditional? The first conditional is about possibilities in the present or in the future. The form is a little bit different to the zero conditional. We start with if and a subject plus present simple, but the main clause has a subject with will plus infinitive. The if clause talks about things that are possible but not certain, and the main clause says what we think the result will be in this situation. Let's have a look at some examples. If I'm late again, I'll lose my job. Present simple, will plus infinitive. If we don't hurry, we'll miss the plane. Present simple, will plus infinitive. We'll get there on time if we take a taxi. Now notice if is in the middle, so there's no comma, and the will plus infinitive is in the main clause in the first part of the sentence. Then present simple after if. I'll cook if you do the washing up. Same again. If is in the middle of the sentence. Will plus infinitive in the main clause. Present simple after if. If I get the job, I'll pay for dinner. Get, present simple after if, will pay in the main clause. Now let's talk about the second conditional. The second conditional is about improbabilities in the present or the future. So the form is a bit different, again, to the first conditional. In the if clause, we have if plus subject plus past simple, subject plus would plus infinitive. The second conditional talks about situations in the present or the future which are not likely to happen or are imaginary or impossible situations. The contraction of would is the, and the contraction of would not is wouldn't. Let's have a look at some examples. If I had enough money, I'd buy that jacket. Past simple after if. Would buy in the main clause. But this means you haven't got enough money, so it's impossible. You're not going to buy that jacket. If I had some free time, I'd go with you. In this case, it means you don't have any free time and you can't go with your friend, so it's a second conditional. If I won the lottery, now this is very unlikely, I'd travel around the world. But the likelihood of winning the lottery is very low, so we'd make it a second conditional. Notice that with the verb be, you can use were instead of was after I, he, she, it. Now normally that's not possible, but in conditionals we can do it. For example, instead of if I was younger, I'd come with you, we can say if I were younger. If she were rich, she'd move to the Caribbean. This is a special case for conditionals. Now we're looking at questions in the second conditional. We often make questions in the second conditional with what would you do? And this phrase can come at the beginning or the end of the question. For example, what would you do if someone gave you $1 million? What would you do if someone gave you $1 million, past simple? Or we can move the clauses around and start with if. If someone asked you to jump off a cliff, what would you do? These are very common hypothetical questions. Now let's look at the difference between first conditional and second conditional. The first conditional talks about possible situations. For example, if she studies hard, she'll pass the exam. Present simple, will plus infinitive. This means for you that she's a good student and you think she might pass the exam. It's a possibility. If you use the second conditional with the same kind of sentence, if she studied hard, she'd pass the exam. This means for you she's not a good student and she never studies, so you don't think she will pass the exam. So, second conditional is for an imaginary situation. First conditional, a possible situation. Now let's look at the third conditional. The third conditional talks about the past, and it talks about a hypothetical past. So the form involves some past tense. It's got past perfect in the if clause, and it's got would have plus past participle in the main clause. The third conditional is the same for all subjects, which is handy. Third conditionals talk about conditions in the past that did not happen and cannot be changed. So they're often used to talk about regrets or to reflect on past situations that you can't change. Let's look at some examples. If I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house. Had won, past perfect. Would have bought, would have, plus past participle. This means that you didn't win and you didn't buy a house. If I hadn't gone to London, I wouldn't have met my boyfriend. But in this case, it means to London and you did meet your boyfriend. So it's the opposite is true. If I had saved, past perfect, some money, I would have bought a car. Would have past participle. But this means that you didn't save any money and you didn't buy a car. The important thing about the third conditional is that both the condition and the result are impossible now. It's not possible to change the past. Now in the second and third conditionals, it's possible to replace would with another modal verb. We can use should, could, or might instead of would. For example, if I had more money, I could buy a car. If I won the lottery, I might give all the money to charity. If you had bought a lottery ticket, you might have won. If I had met Michael Jackson, I could have asked him how to moonwalk. So these are all in second and third conditionals. We can replace would with other modals. Another thing to look at is mixed conditionals. Sometimes we want to express a condition from the past that has a present result. And in this case, we need to mix the second and third conditional. For example, we can look at the first part of this conditional. If I hadn't become a doctor in the past, so this is the third conditional, I would be a dentist now. This is part of the second conditional. So this is talking about a past situation and a present result. If I hadn't met your father, third conditional, you wouldn't be here now. Second conditional, talking about the past and the present together. If I hadn't won the lottery, I wouldn't be a millionaire. Present situation. I would have the job. This is the second conditional. If I hadn't had a bad interview. So in this case, we've turned the clauses around, and the second conditional is first, the third is second. So mixed conditionals usually consist of a second and third conditional in the same sentence. Okay, let's look at a summary of what we've looked at today. The zero conditional is about facts and things that are always true. The form is with present simple in both clauses. For example, if water reaches 100 degrees, it boils. True fact. Present simple, present simple. The first conditional is about future or present possibilities. The form is with present simple after if and will plus infinitive in the main clause. If I pass my exams, I'll study medicine. It's a possibility. The second conditional, on the other hand, is about future or present improbabilities, unlikely to happen. And the form has the past simple and would plus infinitive. If I won the lottery, I'd travel around the world. It's not probable, but that's what I would do. The third conditional is the one that talks about the past, but hypothetical situations. Situations you can't change. In the if clause, we have past perfect, and after the subject, would have plus past participle. For example, if I hadn't passed my English exam, I wouldn't have got this job. Okay, I hope you've learned something about conditionals today. Thank you for joining the class. You've been watching a Speak English online video. Hope to see you again.